Previously.
The worst part about this is how unbelievably filthy you get. I have an idea to where I'm going to kind of make a tent under the car, my own little makeshift paint booth, which means that we have to break out the old orbital sander and sand the entire underbody of the car. Day 3 of taping up the car. It is starting to wear on me, the amount of seams on this thing. This stuff is messy. It sticks to literally everything. Honestly, I am surprised it came out of a cannon. Wow, I am impressed with Raptor Liner. Welcome back to episode 2 of my track car build series, where I am rebuilding Yuki, my Miata, from the ground up to make her the ultimate track weapon. And to do that, today we are going to be focusing on the interior. And according to our to-do list, we have to clean up the body and reduce weight. Now, I have already gotten the car painted, and I just got done redoing the entire underbody. So there's not a whole lot to clean up anymore. So we're gonna be focusing mainly on reducing weight. And to do that, we are going to be ripping out everything in the inside of the car. According to Grid Life's rules, we don't need to keep a single thing in there other than the dash. So that means everything can go. There hasn't been a whole lot that I've touched on the inside of the car in the first place, minus the roll bar and some seats and a quick release steering wheel. Technically, there's also been a shifter rebuild, but the transmission's not in the car right now, so it doesn't really count. I think the plan here is to just go ahead and start ripping out anything on the interior, which is honestly the easiest part, and then keeping everything organized so that we know what we need and what we don't. And then I want to focus on the things under the dash, because there's a whole lot under there, like wiring, the heater core, and there's stuff that I can't quite get to in between the firewall and the engine bay that I can only get once I remove the dash, like the brake booster. And that's all stuff that is going to get replaced with all new things anyways, so might as well just tear it apart now. Well, it's time to address the elephant in the room. There is a panel on this thing that has one or a few too many holes in it. I believe it is just an access panel for the fuel pump assembly and all that going on. I have a theory that when there was carpeting in the car and then there was also sound deadening under the carpeting, the previous owners let it rain while the top was down, and that sound deadening that was in there just soaked up with water and just rusted this thing away. And it is absolutely riddled with holes. And I knew about it, especially when I was doing the roll bar for the car, because you have to cut away at a little bit of the interior to make the roll bar fit. And so I knew it was there, and I especially knew when I was doing the underbody, and I could visibly see through the bottom of the car. But now it comes to actually addressing it. I'm not too sure how I'm gonna do it yet, because those screws are absolutely gone. There's no way to do anything with it. I might try and make just an aluminum panel and just cover it up with some bolts or something. That is my idea as of right now, but I'm not too sure how to even remove it. So let's figure it out together.
Some of the screws had what seemed to be the remains of a Phillips head, so I attempted to remove what I could the normal way, and this worked flawlessly for a grand total of 1 of them. All the others were too rotted away and stripped immediately, leaving no conventional way to remove them. Then, looking at it from the underside, I noticed tabs on the retaining clips that could possibly be pushed in to remove the whole panel in one piece. Of course, this didn't work either, since the screws were still in place, preventing any kind of movement, meaning I had to come up with yet another way to get this thing off. Resorting to methods less tasteful, I grabbed a drill bit slightly smaller than the screw to prepare it for an extractor bit. I got a little overzealous in my pursuit of destruction, which led to 1 less drill bit than I had before. I was beginning to realize salvaging the retaining clips might not be so easy.
Super excited about how this thing turned out. It is quite literally a perfect OEM fit minus the original hump that the first one had. I'm not too sure why it had it in the first place. It probably was just extra clearance for the fuel hoses, but completely flat, this thing should be no problem. Now, I did have to destroy the original mounting points to get the old access panel off. So I had to get a little creative how I'm going to mount this new one. And I went to the store and I found this little rubber grommet. It has a little threaded end, and then the middle part is just nothing but rubber. And so when I put a bolt onto it, it should crush this middle part and hold everything on just by tension. But we aren't going to have to worry about that for a while because we still have a lot to take apart. So let's get back to it. Been making some progress in tearing apart the interior of the car. It's been honestly going a lot quicker than I expected. There's a lot of small little interior pieces that I'm trying to save. That way someone else that may want it later on can buy it off me, and I'll also recuperate some of the costs. Now, one of those big things is the carpet. I'm sure someone out there would like that, and I don't particularly need it. So I'm trying not to cut it out, and that requires pulling the dash first because it's all one piece. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to tearing this apart, and then I also at the same time want to label any wiring that I can find to see what I do need and what I don't, and it will make wiring everything much easier later on. finally got the dash out of the car, and honestly, it took much longer than I was expecting. Between the various pieces connecting it to the body, and then especially the wiring, there was a lot to disconnect. Specifically the HVAC system, there was a ton of screws connecting that just to the dash that I needed to disconnect. Luckily, a lot of that isn't going back into the car because race car, so putting it back in should be a lot easier, especially when it comes to the wiring. I have a plan to drastically remove the amount of wires running through this car. I'm going to continue removing what I can from the car, and then once we get under the carpet, we can start focusing on weight reduction, which was the whole point of this video in the first place.
As I continued to tear deeper and deeper into the car, I started to realize where a majority of the weight lies. All the creature comforts add up quickly. Removing the air conditioning, blower motor, and heater core dropped what seemed to be 25 to 35 pounds, and I haven't even taken the piping out under the actual dash yet. Carpeting and cloth sound deadening had a surprisingly large amount of heft to them. The more things I pulled out, the more excited I got as the car began to look more like a dedicated track car. At first, I just wanted to rip everything out that wasn't necessary and get the car in an operating condition. But the perfectionist within me wasn't about to let that happen. One thing became very prominent, and that was how filthy it was under everything. Having redone the exterior and underbody already, I saw a revision of the interior as necessary. Much like the underbody, I want to redo the seams and give it a fresh coat of white paint. But between the endless wires running throughout the car, the thick tar mats used for extra sound deadening, and the 30 years of built-up dirt and grime, I have my work cut out for me. As I am sure you guys are enjoying watching me repeat the same exact steps as the previous video, I thought I'd spice it up by diving into a little side project at the same time. As you may or may not know, cars have quite a few bolts, and particularly with this car, they happen to be turning 30 years old this year. What better way to celebrate than giving all that rusty used hardware a refresh? There are definitely simpler ways of doing this, but that's no fun. I could easily hop onto McMasterCar and go trigger happy with the purchase button, but that's also expensive and doesn't solve the issue that some of these bolts are custom made for their application. Unfortunately for me, this means I have to go through every single nut and bolt on this car.
The way that I'll be redoing all of these bolts is one of the more cost-effective options. Now, if you had endless cash, then dish out a little bit of dough and get brand new hardware, or sandblast everything and recoat them in a new zinc plating. Unfortunately for me, I don't have those funds, so I have to get a little creative with how I'm going to be doing things. And for now, I'll be sticking with an ultrasonic cleaner, some heavy-duty rust reformer, a general all-purpose cleaner, and some black oxide concentrate. Honestly, the steps to doing this isn't really that difficult. It's more a battle of keeping everything organized to know where you are putting it back once you're done. Now, I have about 1.5 billion of these baggies filled with different kind of hardware that I threw into the ultrasonic cleaner for about an hour to an hour and a half with the heavy-duty rust reformer. And I set this as hot as it could go because I thought that that would help with the removal of the rust. And so everything sat in the ultrasonic cleaner for about an hour to an hour and a half. And then after that was done, I transferred it into a box of distilled water where I wire brushed everything, just scrubbed it down to make sure all of the excess material that was taken off actually got off the hardware. And then I immediately took it over to an air compressor and air dried it as much as possible to make sure that there's no flash rusting happening before I hit it with the black oxide concentrate. And to be on the safer side, I went and bought a thread chaser set. Do not get a thread tap and die set. They are two totally different things. The thread chaser set is more of a softer material, so it can't cut into the threads that are already there. They can only reform them and take out all the gunk that was there in the first place. So once I did that, I bagged them and then moved on to the next one, where I then poured a bottle of this into one of these containers and then also diluted it 1-to-1, which means that this is 8 fluid ounces, so I need 8 fluid ounces of distilled water to mix all of my hardware and turn them all black. And with that, we are finally done with painting. Every little inch of this body has been sanded, sealed, and repainted once again. And I am absolutely blown away with how good it looks. It is beautiful. And I'm sure in time it'll probably get nasty again, but that just means I'll be forced to keep up with maintenance and keep this thing clean. I managed to finish off all of the hardware at roughly the same time that I finished off all the painting on the body, which was fantastic. Although I am somewhat disappointed with how the hardware turned out. I wouldn't blame any one specific thing, but for some reason the M4 bolts that bolt directly to the body of the car started almost immediately surface rusting when I started drying them off, which none of the other hardware did that, so I'm kind of curious as to why they did that. If I were to do this again, either I would properly sandblast everything and zinc coat it, or I would let the materials soak in the black oxide concentrate for longer, because most of the bolts turned out a grayish light gray, which I think if you let them sit in there longer, they would actually turn black.
With this whole video's purpose being weight reduction, how much did I actually save? Well, there's the entirety of the interior that was taken out, along with the horrendous globs of seam sealer absolutely everywhere. I went through all the parts to separate what needs to go back into the car and what doesn't, and at the same time, I bagged all the material I vacuumed up for when I first started. Weighing myself to establish a baseline, I came in at a humble 149 pounds. After grabbing all the interior trim pieces, I weighed myself again and I came in at a 165 pounds, meaning we cut 16 pounds of random plastic throughout the car. I did this again for the AC, heater core, and blower motor, which was another 15 pounds. Lastly, I grabbed the bag of seam sealer, which came in at 8 pounds, meaning we saved roughly 39 pounds. This may not seem like a lot, but in a low horsepower car like a Miata that already weighs close to nothing, every little bit counts.
What better way to celebrate this milestone than installing our first mod onto this brand new chassis? So here I have Flying Miata's door bushings. The old bushings are rubber and also 30 years old, so you already know they aren't that rigid. These, on the other hand, are hard plastic, and supposedly they stiffen up the entire body of the car in all situations. Plus, it's ridiculously easy to install these things. I went ahead and refurbished the bracket the door bushing goes into with a quick coat of black paint, and now it's time for reassembly. Put the bracket back from where you disconnected it. No need to worry about alignment since the screws are beveled. They'll just go right where they want to. Then all you have to do is lightly bolt in the bushing, close the door to get the correct position within the bracket, and tighten the bolts, and you're done. Whoa, not those. I need content. We'll put those on later. Are you serious? I just unpacked it. Okay.